Poor black woman lets millionaire stay overnight during storm. Next day, he proposed a contract marriage. By morning, he would make her an offer that would sound like salvation. But salvation, she would learn, always comes with a price. Have you ever sat across from someone and felt like they could see straight through you? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She signed a marriage contract with a complete stranger and woke up the next morning wondering if she'd lost her mind or finally found her way out of hell. 24 hours earlier, Keisha Williams was counting crumpled dollar bills on her kitchen table, praying they'd somehow multiply before the rent notice turned into an eviction. The math was brutal. $347 between her family and homelessness. Her younger brother Marcus sat across from her, textbooks spread around his laptop, pretending not to notice her hands shaking as she sorted the bills for the third time. Keisha, maybe I should drop out and get a job, Marcus said quietly, not looking up from his chemistry homework. Don't even think about it. Her voice carried the steel that had kept them alive since their parents died in that car crash 5 years ago. You're getting that degree. Period. The thunder outside matched the storm in her chest as rain hammered their trailer's thin walls. She'd been pulling double shifts at Murphy's Diner for months, but tips in rural Louisiana barely covered groceries, let alone Marcus's college expenses. The scholarship helped, but not enough. Never enough. Have you ever felt trapped between your pride and your desperation? When doing the right thing might cost you everything you've worked for. That's exactly where Keisha found herself that night, until destiny knocked on her door. The knock came at 11:47 p.m., sharp and urgent against the storm's chaos. Keisha froze, hand halfway to the light switch. Nobody visited them this late. Nobody visited them at all. Stay back, she whispered to Marcus, grabbing the baseball bat they kept by the door. Another knock, more insistent this time. Please, a male voice called through the door, refined and out of place in their neighborhood. I'm not here to hurt anyone. My car broke down. I just need to use a phone. Keisha peered through the peephole and saw him. Tall, white, expensive suit soaked through, standing under her broken porch light like some lost prince. Everything about him screamed money, from his perfect haircut to shoes that probably cost more than her monthly income. Against every instinct screaming danger, she opened the door. He stepped inside, water dripping onto her worn linoleum, and something shifted in the air between them. His eyes swept over her. Not with judgment, but with something that made her skin warm despite the storm's chill. She was suddenly aware of her oversized Lakers jersey, her bare legs, the way her hair fell loose around her shoulders. Thank you, he said simply, and his voice carried gratitude that seemed too deep for such a small kindness. Phone's on the kitchen counter, she managed, trying not to stare at how his wet shirt clung to his chest. While he made his call, something about a driver, a hotel, tomorrow's meetings, Keisha caught Marcus staring with wide eyes. She couldn't blame him. This man looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, all sharp jawlines and confident presence that filled their tiny space. No service until morning, the stranger was saying into the phone. I see. Yes, I'll manage. He hung up and turned to face them, running a hand through his dark hair. I'm afraid I'm stranded until my driver can reach me. The roads are flooded. What happened next surprised everyone, including Keisha herself. You can stay, she heard herself saying. Until morning. The couch pulls out. Marcus shot her a look that screamed, have you lost your mind? Maybe she had, but something about this man's quiet politeness, the way he'd said thank you like he meant it, made her want to help. I couldn't possibly. It's fine, she cut him off, already pulling sheets from the closet. Just for tonight. As she made up the couch, hyper-aware of his presence behind her, Keisha had no idea she was arranging the bedding for the man who would change her life forever. The man who would offer her everything she'd ever wanted and take away everything she thought she knew about herself. By morning, he would make her an offer that would sound like salvation. But salvation, she would learn, always comes with a price. The richest man she'd ever met was about to make her the poorest offer of her life. Except it wasn't what she expected. Keisha woke to the smell of coffee and something that definitely wasn't her usual breakfast of toast and hope. She padded to the kitchen in her pajama shorts and tank top, hair messy from sleep, and stopped dead. The stranger stood at her stove, fully dressed in yesterday's clothes, somehow making scrambled eggs look like art. He'd found her good plates, the ones she saved for holidays that never came, and set the table like they were in some fancy restaurant instead of a cramped trailer. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes lingered on her bare legs before snapping back to her face, and she felt that same electric awareness from the night before. "You didn't have to. It's the least I could do." He slid perfect eggs onto a plate, followed by bacon she definitely didn't have in her fridge. "I took the liberty of having some groceries delivered. I hope you don't mind." Mind? When was the last time someone had cooked for her? When was the last time her kitchen smelled like actual food instead of desperation? Marcus shuffled in, took one look at the spread, and whispered, "Are you seeing this?" They ate in comfortable silence, Keisha hyper-aware of every move the stranger made. The way he cut his food with precise movements. How he asked Marcus about school, actually listening to the answers. The way his sleeve rolled up when he reached for the salt, revealing an expensive watch and forearms that made her mouth go dry. Have you ever sat across from someone and felt like they could see straight through you? Not in a judgmental way, but like they understood things about you that you'd never said out loud? That's how this man looked at Keisha, with an intensity that should have scared her, but somehow felt safe. After Marcus left for his morning classes, the stranger finally introduced himself. "My name is Nathan Cross," he said, leaning back in his chair, "and I have a proposition for you." Keisha's stomach dropped. Here it comes, she thought. The catch. The reason a man like him would be kind to a girl like her. "I need a wife," he continued, his voice matter of fact. "For 1 year. In return, I'll pay off any debts you have, ensure your brother finishes college, and provide you with more money than you've probably ever seen." The words hit her like ice water. "Excuse me, a marriage contract. Legal, binding, but temporary. You'd live as my wife, attend social functions, present a united front. After 1 year, we divorce quietly, and you keep everything." Keisha stood up, so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "You think I'm some kind of—" "I think you're exactly what I need," he interrupted, standing too. The kitchen suddenly felt tiny with both of them upright, the air charged with tension. "And I think I might be what you need too. You don't know anything about what I need, don't I?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head swim. "I know you work double shifts at Murphy's Diner. I know you've been taking care of your brother since your parents died. I know you're 3 months behind on rent, and Marcus's tuition payment is due next week." Her face went hot with embarrassment and anger. "How do you? It doesn't matter how I know." His voice dropped to something almost gentle. "What matters is that I can fix all of it. Tonight." Before she could respond, before she could tell him exactly where he could shove his proposition, he placed a business card on her table. 24 hours, he said, moving toward the door. "That's how long the offer stands. After that, I disappear and you never see me again." As the door closed behind him, Keisha stared at the card in her trembling hand. Nathan Cross, CEO, Cross Industries. And at the bottom, handwritten in neat script. "Some cages are made of gold, but they're still cages. The choice is yours." She'd spent her life refusing handouts, until the day a stranger offered to save everything she loved and asked for her soul in return. Keisha couldn't focus on anything. Not the lunch rush at Murphy's Diner. Not Mrs. Henderson's complaints about her coffee being too cold. Not even the way her feet ached from standing for 6 straight hours. Her mind kept circling back to Nathan Cross and his impossible offer. 1 year, that's all he wanted. 12 months of pretending to be his wife. And Marcus could finish college debt-free. They could move out of the trailer. She could stop counting every dollar, stop lying awake wondering how long before everything fell apart. "You're burning the bacon, honey," called Joe, the cook, snapping her back to reality. "Sorry," she muttered, flipping the strips with shaking hands. The lunch crowd thinned, leaving Keisha alone with her thoughts and the business card she'd read 100 times. She'd looked up Cross Industries on the library computer during her break. Nathan Cross was worth more money than she could comprehend. Tech empire, real estate, investments that made headlines. The kind of man who dated supermodels and attended charity galas. What could he possibly want with a broke waitress from Louisiana? Do you ever wonder why good things feel more dangerous than bad ones? Why salvation often looks like the scariest choice you'll ever make? That's exactly what Keisha was thinking when Nathan walked through the diner door at 3:47 p.m. He looked different in daylight, still expensive, still handsome in that sharp-edged way, but somehow more real. He slid into a corner booth and waited, not ordering, not demanding attention, just watching her with those dark eyes that seemed to see too much. Keisha's hands trembled as she approached his table. "Coffee." "Information," he said instead. "Have you decided?" She glanced around the empty diner, then slid into the seat across from him. "Why me? You could have anyone. Models, socialites, women who actually know how to be rich." Nathan's smile was sad around the edges. "Because they would want more than I can give. You understand transactions. Clean, simple, no expectations beyond what's written in the contract. That's a horrible thing to say about me. Is it wrong?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Keisha wanted to be offended, but he wasn't entirely wrong. She'd learned early that expecting more than you paid for only led to disappointment. "What's the real reason?" she pressed. "Nobody offers this kind of money for a fake marriage without a damn good reason." Something flickered across Nathan's face. Pain, maybe your guilt. "Let's just say I need to convince certain people that I've moved on from past relationships. An ex. Something like that." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. "Look, I know this sounds crazy. I know you have every reason to say no. But I also know you're 3 weeks away from losing everything, and I can fix that tonight." Heat crept up Keisha's neck, part anger, part something else she didn't want to name. "You investigated me. I protect my investments. Is that what I am? An investment? You're whatever you choose to be." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and electricity shot through her entire body. "But choose fast. The offer expires at midnight." As he left money for coffee he never ordered and walked away, Keisha realized she was already falling. Not in love, but into something far more dangerous. A trap that looked like freedom, wrapped in a man who felt like everything she'd never dared to want. He walked into her world like he belonged there, not as a savior, but as a man who recognized her strength before she did. The courthouse in Atlanta felt like a different planet. Keisha stood in the marble hallway at 9 a.m. sharp, wearing a white sundress she'd bought at Walmart the night before, the only thing that felt wedding appropriate on her budget. Nathan appeared in a perfectly tailored navy suit, looking like he'd stepped off a magazine cover, and for a moment she wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. "You came," he said, and something in his voice suggested he wasn't sure she would. "I keep my promises." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "Do you?" Instead of answering, he handed her a small velvet box. Inside lay a ring that probably cost more than her trailer. Simple, elegant, beautiful enough to make her breath catch. "It was my grandmother's," Nathan said quietly, slipping it on her finger. The fit was perfect, like it had been waiting for her hand. "She would have liked you." The ceremony took exactly 7 minutes. No music, no flowers, just legal words that bound them together for reasons she still didn't fully understand. But when Nathan kissed her, soft, brief, surprisingly gentle, something shifted between them that wasn't in any contract. Have you ever felt the exact moment your life changed forever? Not gradually, but all at once, like stepping through a door into a completely different world? That's what happened when Keisha became Mrs. Nathan Cross. The drive to his Atlanta penthouse was quiet, charged with tension neither of them acknowledged. Keisha pressed her face to the window, watching the city rise around them like something out of a movie. She'd never been anywhere like this, all glass and steel and money stretching toward the sky. "Nervous?" Nathan asked, glancing at her. "Should I be?" "Probably." His smile was almost boyish. "I've never been married before either." The penthouse took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city spread below like scattered diamonds. Everything was clean lines and expensive taste, beautiful and intimidating and nothing like any home she'd ever known. "This is yours now, too," Nathan said, watching her take it all in. "For the next year. It doesn't feel real. None of this feels real." He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne again, feel the heat radiating from his body. "But we're going to make it work. Are we?" The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. Nathan reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "We're going to try." That night, as Keisha lay in the guest bedroom Nathan had prepared for her, because despite being married, they were still strangers, she stared at the ring on her finger and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Through the walls, she could hear Nathan moving around his own room, and she tried not to think about what it might feel like to share more than just a name with him. But sleep, when it finally came, was full of dreams about dark eyes and gentle touches and the dangerous possibility that this arrangement might become something neither of them had planned for. She built walls her entire life, but he didn't try to break them. He simply waited at the door until she was ready to open it herself. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Keisha still felt like she was living someone else's life. The Atlanta social scene was a minefield of fake smiles and real judgment. At charity galas and business dinners, she felt every stare, heard every whispered comment about Nathan Cross's surprising choice in wives. The black girl from nowhere who'd somehow landed the city's most eligible bachelor. "Ignore them," Nathan murmured during a particularly brutal cocktail party, his hand warm on the small of her back. "They're jealous." "Of what?" "My ability to use the wrong fork." "Of the fact that you're real." His eyes found hers across the crowded ballroom. "Everything else here is performance." But Keisha was performing too, wasn't she? Playing the role of devoted wife, wearing designer dresses Nathan's assistant picked out, smiling on command. The only real thing was the way her skin burned every time he touched her, the way her heart raced when he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. The breaking point came at Marcus's college visit. They'd driven to Louisiana so Nathan could meet her brother properly, and Keisha watched nervously as two parts of her world collided. Marcus was polite but guarded, clearly overwhelmed by Nathan's presence in their tiny trailer. "So you marry my sister," Marcus said over dinner at Murphy's Diner, the closest thing to fine dining their town offered. "I did." Nathan cut his meatloaf. Probably the first time he'd eaten anything that came from a can, without complaint. "Why?" The question hung heavy between them. Keisha held her breath, waiting to see how Nathan would navigate this minefield. "Because she's extraordinary," Nathan said simply, looking directly at Marcus. "And I was smart enough to recognize that before someone else did." Have you ever heard someone describe you in a way that made you see yourself differently? Not with empty flattery, but with genuine recognition of something you didn't know was visible? That's what Nathan's words did to Keisha. Made her feel seen in a way that terrified and thrilled her. Later, walking through her old neighborhood under streetlights that barely worked, Nathan seemed different. Less polished, more human. "I like it here," he said, surprising her. "Really? It's not exactly penthouse living." "No, but it's honest." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "Like you." The space between them felt charged, dangerous. Keisha was suddenly aware of everything. The way the broken streetlight cast shadows across his face, the sound of her own heartbeat, the fact that they were completely alone for the first time since their wedding. "Nathan," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I know this wasn't supposed to be real," he said quietly, "but I can't stop thinking about you. About us." Before she could respond, before she could think about all the reasons this was a terrible idea, he kissed her. Not the polite peck from their wedding, but something deep and hungry that made her knees weak and her walls crumble. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Keisha realized she was in serious trouble. This wasn't just an arrangement anymore. This was becoming real. She showed up at his door soaked from the rain, not for charity or business, but because for the first time in her life, She wanted something just for herself. 2 days after that kiss in Louisiana, Keisha couldn't stop thinking about Nathan's hands on her face, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious. Back in Atlanta, they'd fallen into a strange dance, polite conversation over breakfast, lingering glances across the penthouse, carefully maintained distance that felt more intimate than touching. Until the night, everything fell apart. Marcus called at 11 p.m., voice shaking. "Keisha, something's wrong with my financial aid. They're saying there's been a mistake, that I owe money I don't have. I might have to drop out." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. This was exactly what Nathan's money was supposed to prevent. She'd married a stranger, upended her entire life. And for what? Her brother was still facing the same problems. "I'll figure it out," she promised Marcus, but after hanging up, she felt that familiar panic clawing at her throat. Nathan found her on the balcony, rain soaking through her thin nightgown as she stared out at the city lights. "Keisha," his voice was soft, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She didn't turn around. "Everything. I don't know." He came up behind her, so close she could feel his warmth against her back. "Talk to me. Have you ever reached a point where you were tired of being strong? Where you just wanted someone else to carry the weight for a minute?" That's where Keisha was when she finally turned around and let Nathan see her falling apart. "Marcus might have to drop out of school," she said, tears mixing with rainwater on her cheeks. "The financial aid office is saying there's some problem, and I don't know how to fix it, and I feel so stupid because I thought marrying you would solve everything, but..." Nathan's hands cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "Hey, look at me." She met his eyes, dark and intense in the city lights. "I'll handle it," he said simply. "First thing tomorrow, I'll make some calls. Marcus will stay in school." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why do you care about what happens to us?" Instead of answering, Nathan kissed her. Not gentle this time, but desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. Keisha melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. "Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being fake for me," he whispered against her lips. "You stopped being fake for me." They stumbled inside, still kissing, hands roaming, months of tension finally breaking free. Nathan's fingers tangled in her wet hair as he backed her against the wall, his mouth trailing down her neck. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her skin. "Tell me this is just the contract, and I'll go to my room right now." Keisha's answer was to pull his shirt over his head, her hands exploring the hard planes of his chest. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Please don't stop." What happened next was inevitable. Two people who'd been circling each other finally crashing together. Nathan lifted her easily, carrying her to his bedroom, laying her down like she was something precious. "Are you sure?" he asked, hovering over her, his control hanging by a thread. "I'm sure." She pulled him down to her, and for the first time since their wedding, Keisha felt like she was exactly where she belonged. They made love with an intensity that surprised them both, desperate, hungry, like they were trying to make up for all the nights they'd slept in separate rooms. And afterward, as Keisha lay in Nathan's arms, she realized she was in love with her fake husband. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. Running was the only thing she knew how to do perfectly. Until the day's silence hurt more than staying. Keisha woke up alone. The sheets beside her were cold, Nathan's pillow still holding the indent of his head, but no trace of warmth. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, she let herself remember his hands on her skin, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer, how safe she'd felt wrapped in his arms. Then reality crashed back. She found Nathan in his study, fully dressed in a business suit, typing on his laptop like nothing had happened, like they hadn't spent the night discovering every inch of each other's bodies. "Good morning," he said without looking up. "Morning." She stood in the doorway, suddenly aware that she was wearing only his shirt from the night before. "About last night was a mistake." His voice was cool, professional. "It won't happen again." The words hit her like ice water. "A mistake. We have a contract, Keisha. Clear boundaries." What happened last night crossed those boundaries. Have you ever felt someone pull away from you so fast it gave you whiplash? When someone goes from intimate to ice-cold overnight, leaving you wondering if you imagine the connection, that's exactly what Nathan was doing to Keisha, and it was destroying her. "So that's it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We just pretend it never happened. That would be best." "For who?" "You." Nathan finally looked up, and for a split second, she saw something raw in his eyes before he shuddered it away. "For both of us." Keisha spent the next week feeling like a ghost in her own life. Nathan was polite but distant, treating her like a business associate instead of his wife. They attended social events together, played the perfect couple for the cameras, but the moment they were alone, he became a stranger again. The breaking point came during a charity gala in Miami. Keisha watched Nathan charm donors and socialites, his hand occasionally touching her lower back for photos, and she felt like she was suffocating. Every fake smile, every staged kiss for the cameras, every moment of pretending they were happy when he'd built a wall between them. It was killing her. "Excuse me," she whispered during dinner, standing abruptly. She found refuge in the hotel bathroom, staring at herself in the ornate mirror. The woman looking back at her wore a designer gown and diamonds, but her eyes were hollow. She looked like every other society wife in that ballroom. Beautiful, polished, and completely empty. When she returned to the table, Nathan was watching her with concern. "Are you all right?" "Perfect," she lied, the same way she'd been lying for days. But that night, as they rode the elevator to their hotel suite in silence, Keisha made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this. Loving someone who decided she was a mistake, pretending to be happy in a marriage that was slowly killing her real feelings. "I want to renegotiate our contract," she said as the elevator doors opened. Nathan turned to look at her, something flickering in his expression. "What do you mean?" I can't do this anymore. Not like this." The words hung between them as they walked into their suite, and Keisha wondered if she'd just save herself or destroyed everything. Some conversations change your life not because of what's said, but because for the first time, you stop hiding from the truth. The hotel suite felt like a battlefield. Nathan poured himself a drink with hands that weren't quite steady, while Keisha stood by the window, still wearing her gala gown, but looking like she was ready to run. "Renegotiate how?" he asked finally. "I want to know why you really married me." Her voice was stronger than she felt. "The real reason. Not some story about convincing people you've moved on." Nathan's laugh was bitter. "You don't want to know the real reason. Try me." He drained his glass, set it down with more force than necessary. "My fiancée died 2 years ago. Quel accident." Her name was Simone. Keisha felt something cold settle in her stomach. "I'm sorry for your loss, but what does that have to do with?" "She looked like you." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "Same height, same build, same beautiful dark skin. When I saw you that night in your trailer, for a split second, I thought I was losing my mind." The room spun around Keisha. "You married me because I remind you of your dead fiancé?" "I married you because my father killed her." The admission hung in the air like a bomb. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, his composure finally cracking. He didn't drive the car, but he might as well have. Simone was getting death threats because she was dating me. Racist, violent threats that my father's security team ignored because he wanted her gone. The night she died, she was running from photographers he'd tipped off. Keisha sank into a chair, her legs suddenly weak. "Nathan, you want to know why I need a wife?" "Because my father's will stipulates that I have to be married by my 35th birthday to inherit full control of the company." He figured I'd find some appropriate white socialite and forget all about Simone. Have you ever discovered that everything you thought you knew about someone was built on lies? That the person you'd fallen in love with had been using you in ways you never imagined? That's exactly what Keisha was feeling as Nathan's truth crashed over her. "But you didn't forget," she said quietly. "No, I found you instead." He looked at her with something that might have been pain or guilt or both. "A woman who looked like her, needed what I could provide, and wouldn't expect me to actually love her. Except you didn't count on sleeping with me. I didn't count on a lot of things." His voice dropped to something raw. "I didn't count on you being nothing like her. I didn't count on wanting you for yourself, not as some replacement. And I sure as hell didn't count on falling." "Don't." Keisha stood up, her own composure fracturing. Don't you dare say you're falling for me when you married me to honor another woman's memory. It's not like that, isn't it? Tears burn her eyes. I'm not her, Nathan. I never will be. I know that. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, I look like a consolation prize in a game I didn't even know we were playing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything they couldn't take back. Finally, Nathan spoke. What do you want me to do? Keisha wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. I want you to decide who you married, her ghost or me. She invited him to her world, not as a visitor, but as a challenge. Prove you want me, not just what I represent. 3 days of cold silence stretched between them back in Atlanta. Nathan buried himself in work, while Keisha wandered the penthouse like a caged animal, replaying their conversation in Miami until every word felt like a blade. She was angry, hurt, and worst of all, still desperately in love with a man who'd married her as a tribute to someone else. But Keisha Williams hadn't survived this long by giving up when things got complicated. The breaking point came when she overheard Nathan on a business call, his voice carrying through the study door. The quarterly reports look good, but we need to discuss the foundation plans, he was saying. The one for underserved communities. Yes, medical access, educational funding. It was Simone's idea originally. Keisha felt something snap inside her chest. Even his charity work was about his dead fiancé. That evening, she made a decision that would change everything. Nathan came home to find her in the kitchen, cooking. Not the simple meal she usually made, but her grandmother's jambalaya, the kind that took hours and filled the whole penthouse with the smell of home. What's all this? He asked, loosening his tie. Dinner. Seat. Have you ever reached the point where you stopped asking for what you wanted and started demanding it? Where you realized that if someone couldn't see your worth, maybe it was time to show them exactly what they were missing. That's exactly where Keisha was. She served him a plate, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat across from him like she owned the world. We need to talk, she said. Keisha, about Miami. I'm not done. Her voice carried a steel he'd never heard before. You want to know what I think? I think you're a coward. Nathan's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Excuse me. You heard me. You're so scared of dishonoring Simone's memory that you're willing to dishonor mine instead. That's not. I'm talking. She leaned forward, eyes blazing. You married me, Nathan. Not her ghost. Not some replacement. Not a consolation prize. Me. The woman who took care of her brother alone for 5 years. The woman who worked double shifts and never complained. The woman who was strong enough to say yes to your crazy contract and smart enough to call you on your games. Nathan set down his fork, giving her his complete attention. So here's what's going to happen, Keisha continued. You're going to decide right now whether you want to be married to me or to a memory, because I won't be second place in my own marriage anymore. And if I choose you, then you prove it. She stood up, moving around the table to stand in front of him. You stop treating me like I'm fragile. You stop apologizing for wanting me. And you start acting like a man who knows what he's got. Nathan's hands found her hips, pulling her closer until she was standing between his knees. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, you idiot. The words came out fierce, unashamed. Not because you remind me of someone else. Not because you can pay my bills, but because you're you. The man who makes me feel like I'm worth something. Keisha. She silenced him with a kiss that was all fire and demand, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she looked him straight in the eye. Your move, husband. Nathan's answer was to stand up, sweep her into his arms, and carry her to their bedroom. Not his room, not the guest room where she'd been sleeping, but theirs. This time, when they made love, it was with the understanding that they were choosing each other, complicated histories and all. People say love bridges different worlds, but nobody tells you how terrifying it is to stand in the middle, wondering if the bridge will hold. 6 weeks after Miami, Keisha stood in the conference room of Cross Industries, wearing a tailored Navy suit and the confidence Nathan had helped her find. Gentlemen, Nathan said to his board of directors, I'd like you to meet my wife, Keisha. She'll be heading our new community outreach initiative. The silence was deafening. 12 white men in expensive suits stared at her like she was an alien who'd wandered into their boardroom. She could practically hear their thoughts. "What's the black girl from nowhere doing at our table?" "Mrs. Cross." The chairman finally said, his tone carefully neutral. "What qualifications do you have for this position?" "I grew up in the communities we're trying to help," Keisha replied smoothly. "I know what it's like to choose between groceries and medicine, between rent and education. I know because I lived it." "Have you ever been in a room where you knew everyone was judging you before you even spoke? Where your very presence challenged everything they believed about who belonged at their level?" That's exactly what Keisha faced, but she didn't back down. "With all due respect," another board member interjected, "lived experience doesn't necessarily translate to what?" Keisha's voice carried a pleasant edge. "To understanding the actual problems we're trying to solve, to knowing which solutions will work and which ones are just feel-good gestures that help rich people sleep better at night." Nathan's hand found hers under the table, a silent show of support that gave her strength. "The foundation will focus on 3 areas," she continued, pulling up her presentation: medical debt relief, educational access, and small business microloans. Not handouts, hand-ups, programs that treat people with dignity instead of pity. By the end of her presentation, even the skeptics were nodding. Keisha had done her homework, knew her numbers, and spoke with the authority of someone who understood both the problems and the solutions. After the meeting, Nathan cornered her in his office, pride written all over his face. "That was incredible," he said, backing her against his desk. "You were incredible." "I was terrified," she admitted, but she was smiling. Couldn't tell. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "Have I mentioned lately that I'm crazy about you?" "Show me," she whispered. And he did, kissing her with the kind of passion that made her forget they were in his office in the middle of the day. Their relationship had found its rhythm now. Passion balanced with partnership, desire tempered with deep respect. Nathan treated her like an equal in every way that mattered, and Keisha had stopped apologizing for taking up space in his world. But late that night, as they lay tangled together in bed, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text that made him go rigid against her. "What is it?" Keisha asked, noting the tension in his body. Nathan stared at the screen, his face pale in the blue light. "My father's lawyers. They want to meet about the will." "That's good news, right? You're married. You meet the requirements. Not if they find out about the contract." His voice was tight with worry. "Not if they discover this marriage was arranged for inheritance purposes." Keisha felt ice settle in her stomach. "What happens if they find out? I lose everything. The company, the foundation, all of it." As Nathan's phone continued buzzing with increasingly urgent messages, Keisha realized their fairy tale was about to face its biggest test yet. Because someone, somewhere, knew their secret, and they were ready to use it. She grew up believing survival was the best she could hope for, until the day someone handed her the power to change the system that nearly broke her. The lawyer's office felt like a trap waiting to spring. Keisha sat beside Nathan in matching chairs that probably cost more than her old monthly rent, watching 3 men in identical gray suits shuffle through papers that would determine their future. Nathan's father's will was a masterpiece of control from beyond the grave. Marry by 35 or lose everything. "There are some irregularities we need to discuss," the lead attorney said, his eyes cold behind wire-rimmed glasses. "What kind of irregularities?" Nathan's voice was steady, but Keisha felt his leg tense against hers. "Questions about the timing of your marriage, the circumstances under which you met. Some people are suggesting this union might be more strategic than romantic." Keisha's blood turned to ice. Someone had been digging into their past, looking for cracks in their story. "Are you questioning the validity of our marriage?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We're questioning the motivations," another lawyer replied. "Your husband stands to inherit a considerable fortune. You went from poverty to extreme wealth overnight. It's natural that people might wonder." "What people?" Nathan interrupted. "Who's been asking questions?" The lawyers exchanged glances. "That's confidential, but we need proof that this marriage is genuine. Real emotional attachment, shared finances, evidence of a life built together." Have you ever felt like your private life was being dissected by strangers? Like your love was being measured and weighed to see if it met someone else's standards? That's exactly what Keisha and Nathan faced as these men demanded proof of feelings that couldn't be quantified. You want proof? Keisha stood up, fury giving her courage. Here's your proof. She pulled out her phone, showing them photos from the past few months. Nathan at Marcus's graduation, both of them covered in paint while renovating the community center, quiet moments that had nothing to do with money or contracts. This is Nathan teaching my brother to drive, she said, swiping through images. This is us at my grandmother's grave on her birthday. This is him falling asleep on my couch after we spent 12 hours planning the foundation's first medical clinic. Nathan watched her defend their relationship with something that looked like awe. Those could be staged, one lawyer said dismissively. Then explain this. Keisha pulled up their joint bank account, showing months of shared expenses, her name on his insurance policies, joint ownership of the foundation. Explain why he put my name on everything that matters to him. Explain why he trusted me with his company's reputation. Or explain this, Nathan added quietly, standing to join her. He pulled out a small velvet box, revealing a second ring. Not the expensive one from their courthouse wedding, but something simple and personal. I bought this last week, not because of any contract, but because I wanted her to have something that was just for me. The room fell silent as Nathan slipped the second ring onto Keisha's finger, next to the first. We don't owe you proof of our feelings, he said, his voice carrying the authority that built empires. But if you need it, there it is. I love my wife. She loves me. Everything else is just paperwork. As they walked out of that office, Keisha realized they'd won more than just a legal battle. They'd stood up together, fought for each other, and proven that what they had was real, even to themselves. The world loves to tear down what it doesn't understand. A street girl with a rich man, a powerful CEO with a nobody from Brooklyn. But what they didn't know was that judgment only made them hold on tighter. The tabloid headlines screamed across every newsstand in Atlanta, "Gold digger" or "true love." The shocking truth about Nathan Cross's mystery wife. Keisha stared at her own photo on the cover, a grainy shot of her leaving the foundation offices, looking tired and overwhelmed. The article inside was worse, dissecting every detail of her past, making her sound like a calculating woman who trapped a grieving billionaire. Don't read it, Nathan said, finding her in their kitchen at dawn, newspapers spread across the counter. Too late. She looked up at him, eyes blazing with hurt and anger. They interviewed people from Murphy's Diner, my old neighbors. They're all saying I was always looking for a way out, that I must have planned this. Nathan moved behind her, hands settling on her shoulders. You know that's not true. Doi. The question came out more vulnerable than she intended. Sometimes I wonder if they're right. If part of me did see you as an escape route instead of a person. Hey, Nathan turned her chair around, forcing her to look at him. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see the woman who worked 3 jobs to keep her brother in school. I see someone who's never taken a handout she didn't earn. I see the person who's building something meaningful with the foundation, not because she has to, but because she cares. Have you ever loved someone so much that other people's opinions felt like attacks on your soul? When critics tried to reduce your relationship to stereotypes and assumptions that had nothing to do with your reality. That's what Nathan and Keisha faced as the media circus grew. The attacks got personal fast. Photographers camped outside the penthouse. Reporters called Marcus at school, trying to get him to say something damaging about his sister. The foundation's donors started getting nervous, wondering if their charity was connected to a scandal. Maybe I should step back, Keisha said during a particularly brutal week. Let you handle the foundation without me until this dies down. Absolutely not. Nathan's voice was fierce. That's exactly what they want. They want you to disappear to prove you don't belong in my world. Maybe I don't. Then why are you fighting so hard to stay? The question stopped her cold. Because she was fighting, wasn't she? Every morning she got up, put on her professional clothes, and went to work building something that mattered. She faced down reporters, ignored the stares, and kept pushing forward. Because this is my world now too, she said finally. Our world. Exactly. Nathan pulled her close, holding her tight against the storm raging outside their door. Let them talk. Let them speculate. We know the truth. That night, as they made love with desperate intensity, both of them seeking comfort in each other's bodies, Keisha realized something important. The people trying to tear them apart didn't understand what they were fighting against. This wasn't just about money or status or proving a point. This was about two people who'd found something real in the middle of something fake, and they weren't going to let anyone take it away. 1 year ago, she stood in a clinic ready to sell her body to save her family. Today, she stood on a stage ready to change a system that forced women like her to make impossible choices. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Keisha Williams Community Health Center felt like a dream. Keisha stood in front of the gleaming new building, scissors in her hand, surrounded by news cameras and community members who'd watched her grow up. Marcus stood beside her in his graduation cap and gown. He'd finished college debt-free, just like Nathan promised. But this moment belonged to everyone who'd ever felt powerless in the face of medical bills they couldn't afford. 6 months ago, this was an empty lot, Keisha said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the crowd. Today, it's proof that change is possible when people stop accepting that poverty means you don't deserve health care. The applause was thunderous, but Keisha's eyes found Nathan in the crowd. He was beaming with pride, recording everything on his phone like any proud husband would. This center will provide free medical care, mental health services, and financial counseling, she continued. But more than that, it's going to treat people with dignity. Because healthcare isn't charity, it's a human right. Have you ever stood in a place that represented everything you'd overcome? Where your past struggles became the foundation for someone else's hope? That's exactly where Keisha was as she cut that ribbon and watched the community surge forward to tour their new facility. Later, at the celebration dinner, Nathan cornered her on the restaurant's balcony overlooking the city. I have something to tell you, he said, pulling out an official-looking document. What is it? The will contest is over. The lawyers dropped their investigation. Turns out someone was feeding them false information to try to discredit us. But they couldn't find any real evidence because... He paused, smiling. Because what we have is real. Keisha felt tears spring to her eyes. We won. We won. The company is officially mine, which means the foundation is secure, the community center is permanent, and... He reached into his jacket, pulling out another paper. I had my lawyers draw this up. She looked at the document, confusion growing. What is this? A new contract? Divorce papers. Actually, our original agreement expires in 3 months, and I want you to have the choice to walk away. Free and clear, with everything I promised you, no strings attached. Keisha's heart stopped. You want a divorce? I want you to choose me, Nathan said quietly. Not because of some contract you signed when you were desperate, but because you want to be here, with me, forever. She stared at the papers, then at the man who'd become her partner in every way that mattered. There's something I need to tell you too, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. What? I'm pregnant. The words hung between them like a gift neither had expected. Nathan's face went through a dozen emotions: shock, joy, wonder, fear. Pregnant. 8 weeks. She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. I found out yesterday. Nathan kissed her then, soft and reverent, tasting the salt of her happy tears. So what do you say? He whispered against her lips. Ready to tear up one contract and sign a new one? What kind of contract? The forever kind. She once believed love was a luxury she couldn't afford, until the day the richest man she knew offered her the only thing that mattered: choice. The proposal happened on the roof of their penthouse, under stars that competed with the city lights below. Nathan had set up a simple picnic, blankets, candles, takeout from Murphy's Diner that he'd somehow had flown in from Louisiana. It was perfect in its imperfection, elegant in its simplicity. This is where I knew, he said, settling beside her on the blanket. Knew what? That I was in love with you. Really in love. Not just grateful or infatuated or trying to fill some hole left by grief. His fingers found hers, intertwining naturally. It was that night you defended the foundation to my board. Watching you fight for what mattered. Seeing you refuse to be intimidated. That's when I knew I'd found my equal. Keisha's heart raced as Nathan shifted, reaching into his pocket. I know we're already married, he said, pulling out a ring that took her breath away. It wasn't flashy or enormous, just perfect, a vintage diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light like captured stars. But I want to do this right. No contracts, no deadlines, no ulterior motives. He got down on one knee, right there on their rooftop, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. Keisha Williams Cross, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Will you marry me? Again? For real this time, forever this time, because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Have you ever been asked a question you've been hoping to hear, but were afraid to want? When someone offers you everything you've dreamed of, no strings attached, just pure love and commitment. That's exactly what Nathan was offering Keisha under those Atlanta stars. There's something you should know first, she said, her own voice shaking. What? I love you too. Completely, desperately, forever kind of love. The kind that scared me because I'd never felt anything like it before. Is that a yes? That's a yes to everything. The marriage, the baby, the foundation, the crazy, wonderful life we're building together. She laughed through her tears as he slipped a ring onto her finger, right beside the other two. That's a yes to choosing each other every single day. Nathan stood and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, they were both breathless and grinning like teenagers. So, when do you want to have the real wedding? He asked, resting his forehead against hers. Tomorrow? Next week? I don't care, as long as Marcus can walk me down the aisle, and we can invite everyone from the community center. Done. Nathan's hands settled on her waist, thumbs stroking the place where their baby was growing. Mrs. Cross, Mr. Cross. They made love that night with the tenderness of new beginnings and the passion of deep knowing. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a commitment to the future they were building together. As Keisha fell asleep in Nathan's arms, she thought about the scared girl who'd signed that contract a year ago. She'd been so afraid of needing someone, so convinced that love was a weakness she couldn't afford. Now she knew better. Love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing she'd ever found. And tomorrow, she'd wake up ready to build even more of it. The body she once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice. The ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. 6 months later, Keisha stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 6 a.m., hands resting on her rounded belly, watching their baby move beneath her skin. Good morning, little one, she whispered, smiling as a tiny foot kicked against her palm. Good morning to both of you, Nathan said from the doorway, moving behind her to wrap his arms around her expanding waist. His hands covered hers, both of them marveling at the life they'd created together. She's active today, Keisha said, leaning back against his chest. Just a feeling. Keisha turned in his arms, studying his face. Would you be disappointed if it's not a boy to carry on the Cross name? Are you kidding? Nathan's smile was soft and sure. I'm hoping for a daughter who's exactly like her mother. Strong, fearless, doesn't take garbage from anyone. The second wedding had been everything their first wasn't. Marcus walking her down the aisle of the community center, surrounded by friends and family who'd watched their love story unfold. No contracts, no deadlines, just promises they both meant to keep. Now, as they prepared for parenthood, Keisha marveled at how different her life looked from the one she'd imagined. I have something to show you, Nathan said, leading her to his study. On his desk lay architectural plans for an expansion of the community center, a children's wing with daycare, after-school programs, and family services. The Keisha Cross Children's Center, he said, pointing to the nameplate design. What do you think? Keisha felt tears spring to her eyes. You want to name it after me? I want to name it after the woman who taught me that real wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give back. Have you ever looked at your life and realized you're living a dream you were too afraid to dream? When everything you thought you wanted pales in comparison to what you actually built. That's exactly what Keisha felt as she looked at those plans, imagining the children who would benefit from what she and Nathan were creating together. "There's one more thing," Nathan said, pulling out another document. "I've been working with my lawyers to set up a trust. Half of everything I own goes to our children, but the other half goes to the foundation. No matter what happens, the work we've started will continue." "Nathan, you don't have to. I want to." He cupped her face in his hands. "A year ago, I was stuck in the past, trying to honor someone I'd lost. You taught me that the best way to honor anyone is to build something that helps people who are still here." That evening, they hosted dinner for Marcus and his new girlfriend, along with some friends from the foundation. Keisha watched Nathan laugh at Marcus's stories about graduate school, saw how naturally he'd become part of their family, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "You okay?" Nathan asked later, finding her on the balcony where they'd shared so many important moments. "Just thinking about that night you knocked on my door," she said, settling into his arms. "I thought I was saving a stranger from a storm. Instead, you saved me from myself." We saved each other. As they stood there watching the city lights twinkle below, Keisha's phone buzzed with a message from a young woman asking about the foundation services. Another person who needed help, another chance to make a difference. "Ready to change another life?" Nathan asked, reading over her shoulder. "Always," Keisha replied, already composing her response. Because this was what love looked like in the real world. Not just the passion and romance, but the daily choice to build something bigger than yourself. To take the worst things that happened to you and transform them into the best things you could offer someone else. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along.